welcome everyone. Thank you so much for being here. And just to get started, because I know many of you are in town for this special conference that's happening in a couple days, Miami Bitcoin 2021. Just to get a sense of the audience here, can you please raise your hand if you consider yourself to be a local? Awesome. And if you're visiting for the conference, can you please raise your hand? Okay, great. Cool. So we're at about half. Good to know. All right. So I want to take a moment to introduce, well, actually I'm going to ask you wonderful panelists to introduce yourself, because I don't think I can give you the credit that you deserve. And we're so happy to have Miami representatives speaking here, telling us about the kind of projects that they're working on. And so let's get started with Cameron. Recent move. So.
Very recent move. Hi everybody, my name is Cameron Dennis. I work for the developer relations team at Air Protocol, but I also run a 501c3 nonprofit that starts accredited blockchain courses at universities. So our mission is to be essentially like a matchmaker where opportunities come in and we place them within the proper people within the network. And this is, so we do recruiting, we organize focus groups, we build education material, and yeah, essentially you're a one-stop shop if you're trying to get into the blockchain industry. So it's great to be here, man.
Hello everybody, Mike Sarasti. I am the Director of Innovation and Technology at the City of Miami. I started as Innovation Officer, then went to Information Officer and Innovation Officer, and then I also served on Mayor Suarez's Venture Miami team, trying to make the best of this moment that we have now and make sure that it lasts as a movement. And I also get to interact with some of the fine folks here on a lot of civic tech work, and we've been doing that for years, actually starting up in this space, so it's great to be doing this here at Lab 9.
Thank you. I couldn't agree more. It feels really special to be in Miami. I'm Paola Correa. I lead our global partnerships at 500 Startups. And I grew up in Miami, so I just returned after 7 years in San Francisco, feeling lucky to call this place a tech hub and a home as well. And locally, I am the executive director for TEDx Miami, so always excited to tell our city's stories of ideas and innovation.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Gregory Johnson. I am the co-founder of DataGovs and CEO, and we are a data governance technology company. We work with organizations like cities and operations teams to help them with their industrial IoT. I've been in Miami for 9 years now. I actually started off here in 2013 at the Lab Miami. I had a membership, so it feels great to be back. Yeah.
Thank you, everyone. It's really nice to see people gathered in a place like the lab after a year of seeing everyone remotely, but that makes me very happy. My name is Livio. I am a co-director for Code for South Florida. It's the only nonprofit dedicated to civic technology in South Florida. What civic technology is anything that improves government and citizen feedback, supports public services, and supports civic engagement at large. That is probably a piece of civic technology. We're all engaged with it. And I'm pushing that mission. We're pushing that mission by creating workforce development programs that focus on teaching other developers how to build civic technology and do the legwork behind civic technology while they also gain other professional skills. So that's the more recent focus of the organization. I'm also a local freelance technologist and writer, so I'm very happy to be here. And I've been in Miami since 2007, so this is very much my home.
You can hold it, Livio. While you're there, I'm sure that everybody here would love to hear. Can you tell us briefly why you're passionate about civic innovation?
That's a big question, but I'm very happy to answer it. Well, I'm passionate about civic innovation because it's really one of the main mechanisms by which we can guarantee a better quality of life for all citizens, and we can also help governments build better cities and better societies. Without the advent of civic innovation, which is basically collaboration among nonprofits, among individual developers, among governments and communities, without the advent of civic innovation, there's really no way forward. And I'm passionate about supporting that mission because that's how I can contribute, and that's how I can get everyone else to contribute to building a better South Florida and really just building a better future for our cities and beyond.
Yep. we have one mic, so we'll just pass it
Okay,
along.
I'll pass
All
it
the
over
way
to
it gets
Greg.
back to me.
I'll pass it over to Greg over here.
Nice. And the question is, why are we passionate about civic
Why are
innovation?
you personally passionate about civic innovation?
Well, for me, I think I'm personally passionate about civic innovation because of the advance of technology today is just incredible. And for me, it's more about the fear. So there's a lot of surveillance and there's a lot of mass data collection happening. So I'm passionate about this space because I think there needs to be more control of how your data is being used. I think that's why everybody here likes cryptocurrency and blockchain. It's like, we need to decentralize things. So for me, I'm in this space because I think there's a lot of power and authority that needs to be taken away and given back to the people. And I think technology and civic innovation are probably the best ways to do that, and we're seeing it all across the nation.
Thank you. I'm passionate about civic innovation because I've seen how life-changing it can be at a human level. Growing up in Miami, going to University of Miami, I actually was handicapped for a couple of years and noticed how much technology or lack thereof was impacting my day-to-day. And so I think you realize through every open door or not that it's our duty, our civic responsibility as well, to see the gaps in our city, in our buildings, in our resources around us, and to say, well, this idea and this idea could come together. And I think civic innovation is actually a part of our role in our city, in our society, is to think about what's missing and take the necessary actions to raise that idea, bring it forward, and try to make it happen.
So I think for me, it's, well, first of all, I've been now in government for 15 years. Confession, I didn't start in government with any tremendous amount of passion because I wanted to like change my community, change the world. I really got into it for a paycheck. I was having a bad week in startup land, you know, well, my business at the time, and I'm like, sure, a steady paycheck sounds great. And what I found over time is that doing work in my community gave me a great sense of purpose in my life, helping other people. I discovered that through the work, and I've been very passionate about trying to bring others into the fold. I was just talking to somebody earlier. A lot of my trajectory as innovation officer and what my position now in the city really started here in this building. I walked in on a Saturday morning to my first hackathon. Just someone said, "Hey, show up at this thing, help us organize." You know, a few folks are going to come into this place called Lab Miami on the weekend and build some apps for government. I was like, who else wants to do that unless you work inside of government? And I showed up into this right here where all of you are sitting, and it was a room full of, you know, it was a packed room, much more, probably double what you see here now, and all these people wanted to volunteer their time trying to make their community better. And it was game-changing at that point. I was like, wow, I'm not going to do this locked up in an office. There's this whole other group of people that want to help and try to make their community better. So that was incredibly inspiring. I've come across so many other people that also felt that sense of purpose doing that work, helping out their community. And now that I've been in government so long, I can also confirm that there are many, many hard problems to solve. And the chance of having a lot more brain power come to the table to try to help those problems and develop solutions with us, instead of government trying to throw solutions at you and take a more collaborative approach, is what really excites me.
Yeah, that's amazing. So very similar to you, Mike, I came for the tech but stayed for the people, and that's probably one of the main reasons why I'm interested in civic innovation here. Also, there's a lot of these solutions already exist out there, but people don't know about it. Like you can get, I mean, not financial advice, but you can get 7% on your money consistently in stable coins, lending to certain protocols. And meanwhile, we're putting money in our bank accounts that get 0.01%. And so these solutions exist, but people don't know about it and don't know how to get action in this scale. So the reason why I'm here is because I'm trying to scale a new financial system that is more representative of the people, that actually gives people the power of their own money, and then governance, and the people. So look around, definitely make friends with these people today, because you have no idea how long these relationships might actually last. So yeah, that's why.
Yes, absolutely. Take advantage of the networking opportunities that we're bringing you this week, because there are a lot of bright minds here in the front and in the room. And I'm so glad to hear that Miami has inspired you to come back and that it shaped your point of view when it comes to civic innovation. So with that in mind, we're all curious to hear about the different projects and initiatives that you are all working on respectively in your entities. I'm particularly curious to know about what initiatives you have going on right now that could have an economic impact for the residents here in Miami-Dade County or Florida.
So for me, it's sort of two sides. One is my job with your protocol, and we're a layer 1 blockchain, which means it's an app. Think of it like an app store plus storage and compute that is owned by the people. So with that, you're able to develop applications that are completely owned by the users, and with that, you're able to create more tools, and specifically tools that give people access to their financial independence and even government independence, maybe later down the line. But certain projects, and then there's the education front with the nonprofit. So we teach people about how to build products in this new decentralized world. And specifically with that, we are creating a wallet. We're doing this Ethereum teacher training program. So if you're looking to become a teacher, trying to teach this technology to others, you can talk to PG, it's that guy in the black hat. PG, if you want to raise your hand. He is running a Ethereum teacher training program, so that's really cool. And then other projects, I'm working with Mari and others in this wonderful crowd around the Miami DAO Foundation. So we are working on more to come on that, yes. Yeah, but lots of stuff. So yeah, on the near side of things, if you're looking to learn how to build decentralized applications, definitely let me know, and also talk to many of the people in this area here, because they're all a part of the organization and are willing to help. So a lot of stuff coming.
Okay, and we've actually taken Cameron up on his offer to support at the city and try to educate us on the crypto side. I'm not going to give you any crazy crypto knowledge in this room. I am here as a learner. This new activity that's coming to the city, particularly in the last months, and with the attention that the mayor's gotten through this tweet that happened in December, has thrown me back into this world, learning and listening about a lot. So I'm very excited about that piece. Most of the work we've been doing has kind of been behind the scenes, helping businesses get their businesses up and running faster than before. I had to help somebody open up a business in the city of Miami many years ago, and it was the most painful experience I've ever had to go through in interacting with an organization. And I said, I don't ever want to have that feeling, or anyone else to have the feeling that I just had going through this process. So we've been doing a ton of work around streamlining data to make sure we know exactly where the problems are. We've been training our workforce through our Miami Innovation Academy, which is a process improvement curriculum that we make available to all city employees. We train about 20% of the workforce right now to teach them how to do basic process improvement and draw a connection to new modern technology practices. We kind of trick them into learning things like Agile by using Post-it notes, which makes it, the idea is that if we teach our employees how to do this well, then we're going to create more bridges for the startups and the other organizations that are doing great work, because we'll look more like the organizations that are growing and starting up in this community. So everything from business licensing, I'm not going to steal Gregory's thunder on some of the work around data governance. We're actually working with DataGovs right now to do a lot of this governance work to make sure that we know who owns, which departments own certain kinds of data, and how do we make this available to the public in the form of open data or in the form of all kinds of different uses throughout the organization.
Awesome. Well, for economic development, especially locally, I'm proud to say that 500 Startups has been an original leader in helping to incubate our local accelerators and startup founders. So if you are looking for any startup growth programs, founder boot camps, even venture capital training, 500 has that free of charge online at the moment, and we do have a Miami office. So it's inspiring to know that there has been a foundation in place for founders who have an idea to really get their growth going, to get training and connections happening locally. We are also planning to bring pre-money, the VC conference, back to Miami in December. So currently working on developing the plans to be here in our city and really bring the venture capital community together. What's most important about this is actually giving access to Miami to know that this is happening and to be a part of this, because it shouldn't only be in Silicon Valley, and it shouldn't only be in Menlo Park and Sand Hill Road. But really, we have a diverse set of ideas here in Miami, and they can and will come together when we give them that opportunity, that stage. Additionally, nonprofit side, I'm very excited to share that TEDx Miami is back to hosting events in person. So we would always love to have volunteers or very passionate professionals get involved and even share their own story as we're building our new in-person community this year.
Ooh, this is a big one for me. So for a lot of folks that don't know, I was the first Civic Innovation Fellow here in Florida at Microsoft. And I also joined Code for Miami in 2014, and together with Livio on my left hand, we created Code for South Florida in 2019. So we've worked at the intersection of kind of civic technology with Mike's team with Miami Dade County to modernize affordable housing. We've done some flood tracking. We've done like police misconduct searches. So we've worked a lot in search and kind of like helping people with better services and modernizing that. And throughout it all, one of the biggest things that we ran into was just infrastructure. So there's just a digital public infrastructure that cities need to get better. So through DataGovs, the way we're kind of approaching kind of like this economic development is first starting with connected devices and operations. So there's a company for all the crypto fans in here called IOTA. And IOTA has kind of championed this idea of machine-to-machine communication and building kind of like this blockchain for IoT. The way I consider DataGovs today is kind of like we're not the same version of that, but we're what IOTA would be if it focused on enterprises and cities. And what we're taking an approach in is working with the city to help build kind of like a layer, so an enforcement layer, a governance layer for how all this data is being ingested. That way, let's say you're riding a scooter and you're hopping outside and going on Lyft, and you have a start date and it says that you're at Lab Miami and you stop by, let's say, a medical marijuana store or something like that. The city doesn't have surveillance to say that, oh, I know that you just took that trip. So how do we anonymize that data? We're working on the intersection of looking at things like that, starting with data governance. And that means for us, how is that data being stored? How is it being retained? What's the purpose behind it? Do you have a way to opt out of it? It all starts with data governance. So I'm really excited by that and being able to work closely with the city, who's very focused on human-centered design to kind of offer better experiences to residents here.
Thank you, Greg. So, going off a little bit on that, we worked together at Code for South Florida, and throughout all last year, we spearheaded multiple successful initiatives in different areas of government and just building software for civic problems. And throughout that process, we came up with theory of change, by which we can actually create an ecosystem of civic innovation here in South Florida. And it can, in theory, work anywhere else, because and it starts with the activation and engagement of technologists to work for civic engagement or on issues of public interest. A lot of boot camps here, they'll give you, boot camps, training programs, a lot of professional training programs do a great job of teaching you the fundamentals of how to code and how to build technology and how to work with teams in a startup or an enterprise to build products. But they don't necessarily teach people how to use those skills to actually implement change in their communities. How do you create a database, using actual government data? How do you build those relationships for, to sustain these projects and have these projects make an impact? So, so the first layer of our theory of change is civic engagement of technologies. And from there, once you have civic technologists working on specific issue areas, then the next layer is actually the smart city layer or the open data layer that these technologists will be interacting with. The second step of the theory goes that if you have a data layer that is gathering public information, then individual technologists are going to be a lot more effective at actually solving a lot of these issues. Not only that, government is also going to have another repository of data to understand what's happening in their communities, and even other startups can create entire business models around this data. And the last step of that theory of change is the digital transformation aspect, which refers not necessarily to the implementation of technology, but rather the adoption of technology and the creation of institutions that are focused specifically on the accelerated adoption and training of people to use these technologies for the public concern. And we call that all together the Civic Innovation Framework. And the way that Code for South Florida is working on it right now is that, we're going to step one and saying we need to train technologists to work with issues of public concern, because you can't just, throw Agile or throw Scrum or throw, product management at a civic problem. It's very, very complicated, and it works in many different ways. And that's what we're doing right now. We're developing some workforce development programs based on some templates that we had before. Last year we took a group of students who had computer science students who had literally zero experience in coding, but through their commitment to the causes that they were serving, and with all the right support and the right tools literally at their hands, we taught them how to use their tools, and in the end, the experience for the individual students was incredibly rewarding, and their confidence was greatly boosted, which we all know when you have a successful project. To everyone who's built a project out here, once you build out a successful project and you get traction, there's no greater boost of confidence in that to your professional skills than that. So that's where Co-Professor of Florida is headed right now, and kind of supporting this theory of change and boosting individual technologists who want to really push toward that change through their skills.
Awesome. And I'm loving the collaboration from the different parties here. I actually didn't know that all of them were collaborating on this, so it's good to know. With that in mind, I wanted to ask you, transparency brings acts of citizenship. Like it really catalyzes that interest. So how are you communicating with your respective communities to encourage that change to be pervasive by the contributions?
So I guess I'll start because I have the
So
yeah, transparency is a very it's a very big double-edged sword when you apply it to transparency is really a double-edged sword. On one hand, it's very important to have the data publicized, but on the other hand, there's also a lot of problems that can arise from publishing data and keeping it transparent, right? It might not be in the interest of some, for example, police departments to publish the data that they receive about their police complaints, but on the other hand, citizens need this data to really have effective and meaningful discourse over the use of police force in their respective communities. And that is something that one of our projects did last year called badgewatch.org. It's an open searchable database of police complaints that you can just look at and see as filed by the city of Miami's civilian investigative panel. And the way that having a project like that live out in public in the open space is that it proves the concept that it is possible to implement a protocol or a directive of transparency through collaboration and through the right relationships that can give you access to that data, and with the right skills and the right tool sets, you can publish this data without really asking for permission and without really expecting a yes from anybody. If you have the right tools and the right relationships, you can really make anything happen. And the message is really that we've pushed transparency in this really specific but meaningful way that other people can do it as well. So that's kind of how Co-Professor of Florida has been involved in that.
Yeah, to piggyback on what Livio was just saying, transparency is very important in the space that we're in, which is data governance. A lot of people are very confused, and I'm like, enterprise need better data governance, and these big tech companies need to be able to tell people what their data is going and used for. But on a lower level, let's say in cities, today if you walk outside, if you pay for parking, if you drive your car, if you maybe stop by a bus sign, there may be a surveillance camera and it's taking your data. So what we do at DataGovs today, and what we've been working with the city for, is how do you make it known when surveillance data or your data is being collected? And we've been looking at that. Last year we started off with air quality sensors, which we put at the Metro Rail. So if any of you guys are new to Miami, the Metro Rail is a nice little thing that can take you from different places, from Miami to downtown to Brickell. And what we did is we put air quality sensors up there, solar powered air quality sensors there, and we took that data and we made it into a visualization, and then we looked at the next step, which is how do we make residents and people that are walking through all of these things more aware of what's happening around them. So we built that on a map, and we're looking at different ways to identify protocols to make sure that people can opt in or choose to opt out of getting their data collected. So air quality is not as kind of like invasive, but let's say it's a surveillance camera or body cam. We worked closely with Livio's team on badge watch, and we identified that, hey, it's very tough today to understand and access body cam data that's been taken by a cop once they've kind of used that. It's in the police department system, and it's very hard for residents to get access to. So there are all these kind of interesting problems and hairy problems that are arising that with better policy, with better understanding of data governance, we can address. And I'm very excited to kind of work with the people here to kind of address some of those.
Well, for transparency, this is not my subject of expertise. But with that being said, I have to say 500 Startups is very transparent as a global fund and a very large accelerator program, because every single program, 23 of them around the world, is very open so that there is local resources, local support from the government, from local companies, in giving every company the resources that they need in order to grow and in order to thrive. So sometimes I have people ask me, oh, I want to partner with 500 and I can't wait. I want to know all the fintech companies that you work with. All of this information is public and live, right? I would be happy to help you get in touch, but for transparency, let's do that for the right reasons, right? Let's build a social impact or a bigger reason as to why we're not just giving you access, but why we're going to work together, because that's really the goal. Does every startup that is a part of every accelerator in every city, are they building for social impact? Are they building for growth? Are they furthering their own economic development in whatever country that they're in? And I think that it's a new step in fundraising when you're not just a fund and a private company really creating this cohort, but a part of the ecosystem that's pushing this forward and maybe testing things out. If the first batch was not as successful or not as large or not as sustainable, then what can be better for the second one? And that's where meaningful sponsors, meaningful partnerships come in, like the Knight Foundation, like the DDA, helping to boost an economic platform for startups to grow locally.
So the transparency issue has been an interesting journey for me too. Obviously, coming from government, it is easier for me personally to come in from a standpoint of, being that everything is public record. There's nothing that I can really hold on to. You can see all my emails, you can see all my records, you can see all, just by mindset, it's very natural for me to think about it that way. Where I was a little bit more naive coming into this concept, I mentioned earlier coming to this space and my first hackathon and first kind of bridge between what government was doing and what the startup community was doing. Open data was really kind of my gateway drug into this stuff, and I was wide-eyed. I'm like, oh my God, open data is going to solve everything. Like if we just put the data out there, startups are going to come work with us. We're going to have we got people like Gregory on our team, which we do now, but after a long kind of road to get there, I didn't realize how much of like the scaffolding we hadn't built internally for that kind of work. Our data was incomplete, so we're open about it, we're putting in data sets out there, but we would show up that next Saturday in a meeting, and people are building and doing analytics on this, and we're discovering stuff, we're like, oh shit, that doesn't make any sense. And I kind of took for granted the idea that governments naturally would be producing good data, that governments naturally had a handle on all of their processes, that these things were articulated. So when someone came and asked me, what's your process, what's your data? And that's the expectation, that we could just hand that and give it to people. And frankly, that's where we should be, but it sent me on this long road over the last few years, turning really, with the idea that it would be temporary, kind of away from publishing data out in the open for everybody else. We're like, hey, why don't we start open data even in between departments, us being internal users of that open data, so we can, as they say, eat your own dog food, and start building apps on the data that we eventually want to present to the public. So really the last 3-4 years, in an effort for kind of full-on useful transparency, where we're providing the right kinds of data to our partners, we had to do kind of the hard work to build the scaffolding internally as a department. And that is teaching people about analytics inside, where normally that's not a skill set they would have had. How to craft a good problem statement. What does governance mean? And bringing in people like Greg to bring in tools like DataGovs to help us do that work. with an eye for how this would be used externally. So I say that to say it's actually, as much as there's an appetite in the community, governments, ourselves, certainly no exception, have had to do a lot of internal reflection that our tools and our systems are built in a way that makes it useful for the kind of transparency we all want to see. I want startups to help us solve our problems, but I want to make sure that they're using good data. I know Livio and Greg could probably both tell a story, kind of your first round on some of that police data, which you would get through a public records request, wasn't maybe as useful as you would have liked to have seen it. So I'll let them tell that story as the government guy. I'm not going to put my foot in it. But that story happened in that case, and you could probably find 100 examples that look very similar to the one that they saw.
Yeah, so the point of transparency to me is really about building trust within the community and creating an accountability mechanism so you actually know where to make the change in society. And if you're able to then identify, if you have transparent data and you know what they're doing, then you're able to then craft incentives to get the, goal that you're looking to, go towards. And with programmable money, which is really I think the primary use case that blockchains enable, you're able to now manage treasuries in a more decentralized way and actually vote on things verifiably depending on everyone's heard of these NFTs, but the NFT kind of thing, the most valuable use case to come out of it is around credentialing in my eyes. So what we're doing with the Blockchain Acceleration Foundation mainly is working towards a system where a nonprofit can manage its treasury based on really what the members of it want and have a very streamlined way of receiving that vote back to us, because then we're able to actually dictate what programs we go towards and whatnot. And then on the near side of things, there's a lot of these guilds that exist where you can go request money from a treasury that is democratically managed by certain individuals. And I recommend talking to Sasha over here in the front row if you're interested in learning more about these guilds or more decentralized treasury management. Is to me one of the biggest value adds of transparency in the blockchain space. So for us at BAF, really, we're trying to create it sounds crazy, but a partially autonomous and decentralized nonprofit. And the reason why we created a nonprofit is because it's the closest entity we could incorporate that resembles a government. It has very high reporting requirements. It has very high, lots of activities, lots of programs, and it's step by step. We don't have all these answers right now. We're working through it. We're experimenting, but this is the vision that we're pushing towards, and it starts with transparency. So,
well, I'm happy to hear that both the private and the public sector, there's been some reflection about the value of transparency, and it sounds really it's a work of many. It takes a village, they say. So in Florida in particular, we've been, people often say Florida is a tech hub, but there's still challenges when it comes to having a workforce that's skilled enough to handle the challenges that we are tackling. And it sounds like all of you could benefit from having more people working on these challenges with you. So with that in mind, from your perspective, what are some of the best policies to encourage students to get involved with these civic projects?
So I think it starts with giving them something very actionable. One, education needs to be funded, probably first and foremost. And once education is funded, giving them specific projects to work on. And this is something that we're working on with the Blockchain Acceleration Foundation, and also at NEAR, where I manage our bounties program. If you're a developer or somebody interested in joining this ecosystem, there are so many things for you to do. Just go to for NEAR, it's near.org/bounties, and you get paid to complete things. And so around policy, I think a lot of this, obviously it's going to be very helpful to have the government involved in supporting these efforts, but it's really, those efforts I think would be most helpful in funding education, and then really just funding education and making it easy for bounty programs to take off. And that might be through incentives, whether it be government subsidies or more flexibility around Self-funding mechanisms like micro bonds could be very exciting. Or like municipal bonds. We can get into that another time. But yeah, I think the government can be most supportive by funding education and marketing.
Before you pass it to Mike, I'm not putting you on the spot because you're a city representative. I want to hear your perspective in your ideal scenario. Maybe not what Miami is planning to do right now, maybe something that they're planning to do in the future, or maybe something that you would like to see going forward. In the encouragement of student participation for the specific civic activities.
Let me answer this a couple different ways. So, one, I think what Cameron said is absolutely correct. Clarity of thought around the problems that you're trying to solve and giving very specific challenges is always a winner. And we have historically been very bad about this in government organizations. It's the reason why we teach it. Actually, crafting a good problem statement is much harder than people think. People are naturally pretty bad at being clear about that sort of thing. They tend to jump towards the solution, like, I know how you're gonna fix this thing. This is what you need to do. And then they tell you what you need to do, as opposed to be like, well, let's get a little bit clear about that. So our team has been a lot better about crafting kind of shovel-ready problem statements, and we've got quite a few in our resilience area that we're pushing forward, which hopefully is the kind of thing that's gonna attract better clean tech companies, better climate technology in the community. We're trying to bring more acceleration. I see you back there. More of these kinds of businesses into our community to tackle our hardest problems here. Together. I think there's a lot of incredible talent in this community. I would love to see that we have less people left behind in these conversations than we've historically had in the past. I was talking to somebody here earlier, like a win in this space in particular when we're talking about crypto and NFTs, it still feels like a very kind of closed, you're on the inside technological conversation. I'd like to see how we break from that. You know, putting on my other hat, you know, I'm a musician in my other life, and I love the idea of what this could do for content creators in our community. And that for me is just one bridge. It just happens to be the one that resonated with me, but we've got to find what those other bridges are so that, you know, as we're doing this education now at the ground level, people can see themselves reflected in this stuff. It's not like, that's what the techies are over there doing in the corner. So that's what I would like to see. It's kind of this fusion between, you know, oh, here's some real problems in your community. People can connect with that. That they see as like this world as something that they can connect with. And I still think we have a lot of work to do in that area in terms of bridging that gap. So thanks for that.
If I could just have one thing.
Yes.
So one of the main reasons why that's very difficult in the crypto world right now is because of custodian laws, money transmitter laws, and custodian money transmitter laws, because it adds all this complexity that makes it less accessible for end users to actually innovate around. So if we were to change laws, it'd be around custodianship and money transmission. So,
Paola, I know you're more, 500 Startups is not focused exclusively on crypto and blockchain technology. So feel free to give your perspective from the other sectors that you work with. What is 500 Startups working on particularly to encourage that participation from students in the different states and countries that you're in?
Thank you. I have to agree with what you said around just making it relatable. And as a student, you don't know what you don't see, and you don't know what you want if you don't know what the role looks like or what the career path looks like or the major, until you intern, until you start to get the job, until you hear from mentors. So the biggest thing that I would say is mentorship is just the first pillar of knowing beyond the textbook. I think when somebody is opening up their experience to you and letting you have a little bit of a peek at it, you can already gain so much. So mentorship is a huge pillar. And I think the other one is our own advocacy as founders, for our innovation and for being the creators who not just build behind the scenes, but can get on stage and speak about what they're doing or promote it a little bit louder, because young innovators are really the future of our economy, and maybe what we aren't doing enough of is storytelling. So I wish, when I was a student here in Miami, I wish I would have known that TEDx was here 10 years ago. I wish I would have been able to get involved and help tell the stories locally. I wish I had known the process for a speaker director here, and what it entails for you to actually vocalize the problem, the solution, how you're arriving at it. Because I think we're all students in this new cryptocurrency world, but when you hear somebody just say, here's how I got here, and this was my way in, or somebody opened the door for me, you become a platform for others as well, which is the best part about tech, is just having an open source community of people wanting to help each other and wanting to help each other because they know, I know what I can help you with, I heard you say, right? Or I know what they can help you with, because, you know, all the dots connect. So that's our biggest job, but as students, I think if we look for them, or if we have those platforms making some noise, students always want to get involved if they know what and why.
So for me, let's see, how do you create a policy? The question is, how do you create a policy that gets students active?
Not how to create a policy, but from your perspective, what do you think is the best policy to encourage the student participation in these civic activities?
Yeah, so I have two answers to that, but I'm going to let Livio talk about the philanthropy role, since he's very much deep into it and worked with a lot of universities on the same challenge of getting students involved in civic tech work. Instead, I'm going to put on the private sector hat, and I think we just need to demonstrate and show more success stories to these students. When I say success stories, oftentimes in Miami and the tech scene, we have these events, but we don't applaud enough of the tech practitioners, like Livio, he codes, I write code, you know, like Sarasti, you know, but we have to talk about the engineers behind the scene, and then there's different types of engineers. There's software, and then there's data. There's a difference between knowing about artificial intelligence and understanding how to annotate and label data so you can get the right machine learning algorithm, versus being able to just program something using kind of like a mean stack or something like that. So we need to applaud tech practitioners, and we need to have more success stories. I'm a graduate of FIU, and I enjoyed some of my time at FIU, but while there, like, I worked for two incredible startups that had multi-million-dollar exits with only less than 10 people. One in 2016 and the next in 2019. At FIU, the scene there is more surrounded by get at a big tech company. And I enjoyed my time at Microsoft, so I had, you know, best of both worlds, but it was great working at Microsoft, but it was better seeing a small startup with no venture backing build something and have a small team work on a problem that was huger than any of us could imagine, and seeing that exit. So we need to start celebrating tech practitioners. We need to bring more of those to the table in any craft that you're in. And we need to start talking about how we can really start addressing some of these problems. I think in civic tech, one of the biggest challenges today is Bitcoin and blockchain related technologies don't necessarily tie into civic tech because there's so many different laws preventing government today from embracing it. The city of Miami is perhaps one of the most innovative today, thanks to Mike and Mayor Suarez, but it can't just stop there. It needs to be people visiting Mike, not just Mayor Suarez. Mike has an entire team. I wonder how many people have gone out to that team and said, hey, let's talk to you about Bitcoin and blockchain and how it can be incorporated in IT. Those things matter. So showing up and then showing out with the people that we have as our local bred talent, I think is important, and getting them introduced to as many students as possible.
Wow, those are all great answers, and I'm gonna try to ride that wave. I'm gonna put my creator hat on first, and I'm gonna say that exposure doesn't pay the bills. Yeah, it doesn't pay the bills, because I see, what I mean by that is that, you know, we see a lot of, I feel like a lot of work, and when we tell people to like volunteer your time, and we tell people to like, hey, go do good in your community, we expect them to do it strictly out of the kindness of their hearts. Right? And what I'm trying to say with that is that volunteering is still giving away your time. It is giving away your most valuable asset into a specific cause to address a specific problem. So I think with that said, I think one of the most important barriers towards having more students and just people involved in general in solving civic problems is access to funding for those opportunities, and creating funded opportunities that also involve also involves solving for or working on some of these civic problems. And back to the example of the students that we had that they didn't know how to code before, it was called the Justice Discovery Initiative. They, what made the project really successful was the fact that, not only were they learning how to code, and not only were they solving a big problem, they were also getting paid as if they were professional developers. And in that way, if you do that with students, you're teaching them, one, that their time is worth money, and that two, that they can in fact create change within their own communities. So that's definitely the first part. And the other part is that, a lot of people say that like volunteerism and a lot of social impact work doesn't necessarily scale. And I would dare to say that is, true in the majority of the landscape, but what does scale are the stories of the successful stories of social impact, because that's going to inspire other people to do the same thing. In the theory of change that we're promoting, there's, we also add another definition to what is a technologist. And when you think of a technologist, you think of a designer or a developer or a data scientist, someone who works actively with technology. But I'm also trying to argue that the technologists are also people telling stories of success around technology platforms. They're the ones who can really understand what's going on and put it in layman's terms so that the community at large and the world at large can really understand what's going on. So, it kind of comes back to echoing what a lot of people have said here, but it really comes down to telling the story and showing people examples of success and using that success to attract more resources and more funding to some of these social impact initiatives so that people don't have to just straight up volunteer their time for free to really enact the change that they want to see in their communities. That is what I see in terms of promoting policies and promoting civic impact. So
pay for it.
Pay for it, yeah. Hey Mike, you got some money there? Thanks.
Absolutely, and because we all know that time is money, and we value everyone's time here, I'm going to stick to a strict schedule, and I'm going to ask one last question. Are you personally working on any initiative that is encouraging, supporting of this newly distributed workforce? Miami has benefited tremendously from the COVID that happened, and there's a lot of digital nomads that have moved here, some working remotely, some relocating altogether. If you are not working on a new initiative that's targeting that fluid, independent workforce, what would be your ideal scenario that Miami could work on? No pressure again on the city of Miami, just we're brainstorming here.
So there's two main things that I'm working on. The first is the workforce development for civically engaged workforce. We cover South Florida, teaching technologists how to engage with issues of public domain and create solutions for issues of public concern. That is one thing. Once you have a technologist who understands how to do that, then you're that much more likely to raise the standard of living for a community or the quality of public services. But the other thing that I think that needs to happen as well is that we need to teach individual developers, whether or not they're employees, how to represent themselves and become their own businesses and become their own sources of production. Right? This to me translates, the way that I express that is I am a freelancer and I am my own business and I represent myself as someone who helps other people build their businesses through my technology strategy services. And I think that every single person in this room has an outstanding skill or something that they're really, really good at that can make them a completely independent economic building block in this economy. So those two things is really what I would advocate for the most. Is one, teaching people how to be freelancers and represent themselves as a business, and two, teach them how to solve civic problems, how to work in the public domain with collaborations with governments, nonprofits, and businesses alike. So, yeah.
So to the question about workforce, here at DataGovs, we're definitely working on a workforce module, and we're still kind of like figuring out all the things that we want to add to it. But basically, we're seeing a huge problem where as we get more kind of like companies and customers on our data governance platform, IoT data is really unstructured. It's messy, security-wise, privacy-wise, and the data is just unstructured. So here at DataGovs, we're looking to work on workforce around data annotation and labeling. and getting kind of like people across our community, whether residents or new people or immigrants like myself, part of it. We think there's a huge kind of opportunity to get people there, especially from Latin America or working in the Caribbean, involved in understanding the importance of data labeling, and we think it's a gateway actually to understanding data analytics professions. Today, we're working with organizations like Miami Dade College and helping a group of their data analytics students get familiar with their platform so they can do different things with labeling, such as annotation of text, audio, image, time series data. We're also doing some video stuff, but all of this is kind of like the pipeline and infrastructure related work before we get to the fancy stuff around artificial intelligence. But it's so needed, and there's so many opportunities to pay and get people at scale, opportunities to make income, feed their families, as well as learn new, much needed and important skills that can help them get to that next step in their life.
Agreed. Remind me the question. So I can.
Yeah. If you're a founder startup who's working on any initiatives that are particularly targeting particularly targeting the fluid and independent workforce that has migrated to Florida.
Got it. Okay. Absolutely. I think that this is the power of our time, is having digital tools so that we can be digital nomads when necessary and social activists when necessary, right? It's all about taking your skills from online and bringing them to the community that you're a part of. So is there something we're working on? Yes. More on the global corporate partnership side, helping partners get in front of founders. And my job every day is talking to big corporates and telling them, well, how will everything that you do speak to an early stage founder that's trying to impact the world? So big products and big companies, but how do you bring it to the core of a founder and their purpose? Because that's the only way that we can really get you in front of portfolio companies and early stage founders who have big dreams but may need the support so that we can bridge that gap. But more immediately, another exciting project that I'm working on is we are announcing and hosting our first live event here in Miami for TEDx Miami. So next month, save the date. And I think what's most important is actually bringing the tough conversations to the table around economics, around sustainable economy and developing that in Miami, and our role in playing that, right? Is your role part of a traditional economy and the things that have always been done? Or are you bringing a new perspective and things that haven't been done? And I think that that's gonna be an inspiring conversation, but what I would love to see more is more participation and more involvement in the questions we're not addressing, right? It's not always celebrating great tech and great innovation, but saying, how can great innovation solve the current problem? And I'm super excited, but I always want more participation and more awareness that each one of us plays a role in these big conversations.
So I'll just reiterate a point that we've already said kind of multiple ways here, which is at the city we've been spending the last few months in particular, now with this wave of activity and interest we've seen in the city, is to activate a bunch of things that we've been doing for a few years, but now we need to turn on. For example, we launched miamigov.com/developer, which is a very crude developer page. For developers in the room, you probably wouldn't think it's an actual developer page, but we launched it with kind of like an index of all of the different open data sets that are out there. There are APIs available. It's what we got so far. We launched an API program to help refine that over time. So we weren't afraid about putting together something that maybe not be perfect is the enemy of done. We wanted to get those tools out there because we've got a lot of brain power coming into our city, and we want to make sure that we've got something available for those that are interested in making community impact. I see Daniel, where'd you go? From Seaworthy Collective, doing a lot of work around clean and climate tech. We want to make sure that we've got our problem statements ready, that we've got our data ready, so when he comes over and says, hey, we want to help you tackle your most pressing problems, what are they? Where's your data? We've got clear answers for that sort of thing. The second part, which is, I'm glad you asked this question because I do have an answer on things that we were doing that we would like to see, and it ties to something Livio was saying earlier, which I do believe that to really get the sustainable work, you gotta pay people, right? Like the volunteer work is amazing for inspiration. A lot has come out of it in terms of like changing our mindset about the way that we think about government, the way that we think about transparency. But ultimately, if you want a sustainable project, you're going to have to make the investment as a city. So how do we create mechanisms to be able to attract the kinds of talent that we want to see in the city, sort of tackling problems in new ways? Right now, go across any city in America, most procurement systems or procurement practices really incentivize you going with some of these big companies, because the way that we put projects out in an RFP or an RFI, we are very prescriptive in government. We're like, I want you to have this button on the top right-hand corner, and I want you to do this, and I want you to do this, and if you don't do all of it, you can't participate in this RFP. So what you end up with is like some huge conglomerate. You end up with the same like 5 or 6 names that you end up with, and they're like, yeah, we can do that because they're a huge company and they've got a division that does everything, but they're often quite mediocre, and you don't get the really innovative stuff with that kind of model. So the idea is, can we modularize our procurement process and say, hey, listen, I just need like 2 weeks of work, and I've got a very specific challenge for this sprint, and can we pre-approve these new developers that are coming into town, the freelance market, and put them sort of in a bucket. You get pre-approved, make sure you have some base level insurance requirements so that the city feels comfortable with the investment that we're making. But we also chop up the challenges in very specific kind of modularized sprint bite-sized challenges, which is the way that most of the tech community is used to working anyway. We're not trying to do, here's a 2-year project for you to work on. It's like, actually, I just need you for the next couple weeks to come work on this thing. And we have a mechanism, structural mechanism to put that in place. So that's an idea we had a few years back. It came out of discussions with Code for Miami back in the day about how we're able to sort of formalize this, both from the city being able to absorb it, structuring problems, better problem statements, good data, and pay people. It was one of the ideas we put forward at the beginning with Mayor Suarez, and he really responded to it in terms of, that's a great way to activate all of these folks that are coming into town and provide them an inroad to help us tackle our most pressing problems. So stay tuned for that. We also have one of the best procurement, most of my counterparts say that their procurement departments are a disaster. I have Annie Perez, who's like the best, and we have one of the most forward-thinking procurement officers, I think in the nation, but I might be a little biased. But she's like all about it, helping make this happen. So we'll be working on that over the next couple of months.
That's fantastic. So for increasing, I guess, empowering freelancers in short, part of the goal of the Blockchain Acceleration Foundation is to create this opportunity machine. And in short, it's opportunities come in from the network, from various protocols, whether, hey, it's build this front end, build this button for this application, whatever it may be. And then everything needs to be tagged a certain way to go to certain people, which means we have to have a database of those certain people. And so this is something that we're experimenting with right now, because this is a very, very large and arduous problem to solve. So this is something that we're working on internally. And then we have recruiting programs. So part of these opportunities, it's a lot of it's employment-based. So we started recruiting about 8 months ago, and I think we've placed like over 15 people at jobs. Granted, this is on the global market, which is actually a really great thing for Miami, because Miami is a beautiful place to live, and also low taxes and great people. So I think just doing that generally, as that increases, more people will be moving to Miami. And then the second thing is we work very closely with this organization called Opolis. Opolis is a blockchain-based organization that provides employment and benefits to freelance workers. So it's essentially an employment cooperative. So if you don't have health care because you're a freelancer and whatnot, go to opolis.org. Maybe it's opolis.org? I don't know. Go to opolis and .co, and you can get benefits if you're a freelancer, which is a really, really amazing thing. So we're actually the person the organization has recommended the most freelancers to Opolis. It's a little biased, but definitely check them out. We only work with like legitimate projects, and that's another key thing in this industry, where I see Miami as probably the most strategic place to scale these models, for the rest of the world. If we can prove it here, Latin America is so ripe for innovation. And if we can, all of these models, this like opportunity machine can exist way beyond blockchain. It can be applied for, clean tech, for marine tech, for civic tech, for anything. But it's this process. So how do we get opportunities in and connect them to the right people? Whether that's at the government level or at the, a nonprofit level, to be determined. But yeah, this is something that we're like actively working on. It's exciting. It's moving forward.
I'm so glad to hear all these answers.